Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here on the last morning of the Almond Conference. I'm so glad that you're here in this session and to hear about something that I feel like I've been teeing up the entire session, as well as have many other speakers and my colleagues. We're here to talk today about the almond industry's sustainability story, the things we're doing on our farm, and how we can really use those both to drive global demand, build confidence in our product, and specifically some of the tools that we have for the industry to do that, why some industry members are doing that, and how we're working to shift the narrative in this space. So I'm excited to talk to you guys about that today. If you've been in any of the former sessions, like I said, this was talked about at the State of the Industry, about how this is an important opportunity and a key way that we're going to continue to drive global demands for California almonds. This is something that was referenced. I spoke at the Driving Global Demand session yesterday morning, and I talked about it there. And then it also came up in yesterday afternoon's innovation session. There were some great questions from the audience. I see some of the people who asked those questions. And one of the questions, actually, that the moderator, Josette, of that session asked the panelists was if you had a wish list for the Almond Board and the almond industry going forward for innovation and new products and kind of keeping momentum for this industry, what would that be? The first one, I think, was nutrition research and continuing to have the foot on the gas with that. And the second was continuing to really build and make bolder our sustainability storytelling efforts and substantiating those great things that we're doing on our farms. So I'm excited to give you guys some of those tools and tell you more about that. So today's session, we have some panelists. I'm going to talk to you. I'll introduce myself in a little bit more detail in a second. We have Mike Briano, who is the VP of Sales and Marketing at Harris Wolff, which is one of the almond handlers in the state, if you're not familiar. We have Josette Lewis, who is a Vice President and Chief Scientific Officer at the Almond Board. And then we have Ashley Bourne, who is the CEO of Sustainable Conservation, who's an important third-party partner of the Almond Board and works a lot in the groundwater recharge and other important sustainability areas. So we're going to hear from them. Like I said, Mike is going to talk about how handlers and industry members are using our sustainability story to build demand and build trust, and why, and some of maybe the challenges that they have in that space and learnings. Josette's going to talk about how some initiatives that we have that are working to shift the narrative specifically on water. And then Ashley's going to speak to some of the partnership work that we've done together in that vein over the past couple years and where we might go in the future. So I am Danielle Veenstra. I lead up sustainability for the Almond Board. I've been here for 11 years at the board doing jobs from our production and environmental research to leading up communication to consumers around the world about how almonds are grown. And now I lead sustainability overall for the organization. And I'm also a third-generation almond farmer, so I'll say almond and almonds. I'll say both. So I wanted to start by talking about, if you were at yesterday morning's session, I referenced this, but some of the trends that are influencing just the sustainability space or that are influenced by that space. And the first being consumer behavior. So it's important to recognize that consumers are concerned about sustainability, about the environment. There's varying levels of that with different generations. We know younger generations tend to be even more forward-thinking in that space. And we know people have different levels of concern when it comes to a variety of topics, just the world in general. Then they get to food and they have specific concerns, and they get to almonds and they have specific concerns as well. So it's important that we recognize and understand that as the Almond Board builds its programming and works to tell this story around the world. In terms of media, it is such a cluttered landscape. I think we all experience this, right? From geopolitical issues, wars, elections, natural disasters. There's so much going on and there's so much fighting for attention. So trying to tell our story in that way can be really difficult at times, trying to cut through the noise. And then for almonds specifically, there's some historic misinformation that the media likes to just drop in there in the middle of stories, right? It's a story about almonds and trade, and maybe there's a little line about how almonds, these water-thirsty almonds, incredibly frustrating. But it's important to recognize that that's part of the landscape. Regulations and policy, there's laws that as farmers we follow from a local, state, federal perspective. There's import requirements, there's mirror clauses from other countries, there's global agreements in the area of sustainability, whether it's the Paris Accord, there's work in the biodiversity space, there's stuff on the horizon. So it's important we understand that and are working as the board to ensure the industry has what it needs to succeed and to meet those things as they come. CPG demands, so consumer packaged goods. This is, the people who are making products with almonds, who are buying our product. They have a lot of demands that come from them that we have to understand, and Mike can definitely talk about that. As well as things that they're beholden to. Some of those same regulations, or maybe different variations on the regulations, they have to comply with, and they then go to Mike and ask a lot of questions about almonds and how they're grown and how they're sourced. Sometimes those are voluntary regulations. They're trying to meet investor or shareholder expectations, and sometimes they're mandatory government regulations. But all of those are important. It's not just the consumer demands that they're responding to. They have a variety of people that they're trying to keep happy as well, but they have a lot of questions for us about almonds. And then farm realities, right? We know it's a challenging time. There's the economics of farming, there's inflation, the cost of things is just higher than it seems like it's ever been. There are new pests continually coming on the horizon and fewer management options for those pests. There's water availability issues, there's SIGMA. So all of these things we're accounting for and trying to understand and be aware of as we're telling our story and be sensitive to those things, as well as try to answer some of the questions that they have. And the Almond Board, in terms of how we're doing this, went into a bit more depth yesterday at the session, but we're working to share this story with a wide variety of audiences around the world. And this isn't me, this is my colleagues. I do some of this work, but there's a lot of people working on the industry's behalf to tell this story to all of these audiences around the world. So in terms of consumers, you've probably heard the Deloitte work referenced here at conference. That was some work that really guided and is going to guide how we continue to build global demand for California almonds into the long-term future. And that really told us where to focus, and it reinforced that sustainability is a key way to drive global demand, to really build trust in our product and talk about that story. It's a good opportunity. But it also helped us refine and focus what regions to really hone in on that story. So for consumers, it's here in California, in our backyard, the people who live around where we grow almonds and see what we do every day. It's consumers in the US and in Germany, so we have programming that works to reach them in the right way that makes sense for those audiences, that's relevant to them. And then the next piece, food companies, so really big focus there on the US and Europe, where that's a high priority for them, but keeping an eye on those other markets as those trends continue to evolve and their needs evolve. Policymakers, so we work to, in the way that is appropriate to the Almond Board in terms of education, we do not lobby or advocate, but to educate policymakers, whether that's here in California, federally, or globally. So in Europe, there can be crossover there. We have colleagues that do that in our Global Technical and Regulatory Affairs Department. And they will also coordinate with the Alliance, so the Almond Alliance, making sure that they have tools that they need to educate and for them, build relationships and lobby, but understanding our industry's sustainability story. And finally, thought leaders. So this is a new area for us, trying to reach the people who are influencing all of those other audiences. We did that for the first time this year at Climate Week, showing up and hosting an event, but really being where those people who are influencing the other conversations are, and making sure that we understand what's important to them and that we're answering their questions. So I want to get into a tool that you guys have probably seen. It's on your chairs, actually. But a tool that we've developed at the Almond Board to help the industry tell this story. This infographic, it represents really like the key pillars of the industry's sustainability story as it stands and as we understand it today. This story spans a variety of topics, so it talks about water, zero waste, biodiversity, kind of our community and local impact. And it really represents some great data that the industry has provided in terms of the CAS program and participation in that, so thank you if you have done that. That data collectively helps us tell the industry's story. It also represents some really great research out of our production and environmental research programs in the past. But we also know there's more to build on here, right? There's other things we can quantify, work to understand, or understand in more depth. So I expect this will continue to evolve. But I want all of you, this is like a great tool for you. There's a URL down at the bottom of the screen, almonds.com/stewardship resources. So this thing is available digitally. It's available in slides that you can download and utilize if you're needing to give presentations or share anything in that way. And then actually, so you have the printed version in front of you, and there's a poster version down at the booth if you would like to decorate your office or put it up at your local grocery store. I don't care where you put it, but that's there for you to help share and even for yourself to understand some of these key facts about the industry. So I'm going to quickly go through a couple key points about this. California almond, or key points from this infographic that we've developed. First is that California almond trees store a lot of carbon. Carbon is, removing carbon from the atmosphere is the #1 way we can work to address climate change. And this industry does that on its own. A key way of doing that is by like artificial carbon removal. There's a lot of conversation about that in the sustainability space, but our trees already do it on their own just by living and existing. They capture 30 million metric tons of carbon. This data is actually from the California Air Resource Board. They are counting on our trees to help the state achieve its greenhouse gas reduction goals. This is their accounting, their numbers, and they're counting on this industry to help us collectively do that. So we need to understand and get credit for that and be talking about that. 30 million metric tons, like what does that mean? That's why we've got these equivalencies here. So it's like 3,000 Boeing 737s, which is actually equal to the world's top 3 airlines in terms of number of planes. Like that's a big impact that we are removing as an industry. 24.5 million cars, it's the same amount of cars as are on the road in California, Texas, Oregon, and Washington combined. So our trees are doing a lot of work in terms of carbon removal. It's also important, though, with carbon to recognize that we emit carbon as we farm, right? It's not just the removals that our trees do naturally. So we've looked at that. We've done a life cycle assessment on California almonds, and the data proves it's not just the California almond industry and our product is low carbon. The emissions that we have are not all that much over the what the trees capture. So you can see where almonds fit here. That's where the green arrow is compared to a wide variety of foods, actually lower than tofu, another important plant-based or popular plant-based food. So specifically 1.2 kilograms of carbon per equivalent per kilogram of food. So very low carbon footprint for almond, and that's when you account for the things that we emit actually as we farm. So very low carbon food. In terms of biodiversity, another important sustainability area, this industry is doing a lot of great work. Obviously, supporting pollinators and keeping bees healthy is inherent to our business, right? We need healthy bees to pollinate the crop. Bees consistently leave healthier than when they've arrived. We know that. We see like the frames get bigger on our farms, the number of bees in there grow. But that's something that we need to recognize and talk about. But beyond that, we know a lot of the industry is working to plant cover crops. It doesn't work everywhere, but it does work in a lot of places. It's something that I've done on my farm, and as we do that, we're helping to build and support biodiversity on our farms. Specifically, there's a certification for this, the Pollinator Partnerships Bee Friendly Farm certification. 86% of their certified farms are almond farms. That's a big deal, and that's something that we can talk about and should talk about. If you've been in some of the sessions, or actually one that is competing with this one, so I'm glad you're here. But using hulls as an ingredient, using our byproducts is another big way that this industry really stands out by using those co-products and putting them to good use. So there's the hull that traditionally has been used as dairy feed. There's the shell that's traditionally been used as livestock bedding, the tree itself, which historically went to cogeneration and creates electricity. But we're working to innovate and find new uses for those things. But even just using them for those uses helps other industries and offsets needs for other things. Specifically, when it comes to hulls and using them as dairy feed, that offsets the need to grow a whole bunch of alfalfa, and that saves water. We've quantified that. By using those hulls as dairy feed, we save 440 billion gallons of water by not growing that and just by using our hulls. So when we talk about almonds and water, right, we know that's a popular topic. It's a bit misleading because we grow these other things and have always put them to good use. And as we put them to even better uses, that water story can get even better. 440 billion gallons of water, it's the same as 4 million households. It's a lot of water. And then finally, why California? Why are we growing almonds here? I get the question, like, you're growing almonds in a desert. Why can't we just grow them somewhere else? Well, number one, Mediterranean climate. There's 5 around the world. This is one of them. They all grow almonds. Actually, I know there's some Australian almond representatives here in the audience, but it's one of the 5 places we can grow them. So it's really it's our responsibility to figure out how to do it right and how to do it responsibly. There's a lot of family farms here in this industry. Over 90% of our industry is family farms. 70% are 100 acres or less. That's not to say that big farms are not good and doing good things as well, but it really helps to build trust in the industry. People like the concept and the idea of a family farm, and it's largely what this industry and who this industry is made up of. And finally, California has some of the highest, if not arguably the highest and highest enforced regulations around the world when it comes to environmental safety, food safety, and worker safety. That's something we're working to quantify and compare better, but it's really important to understand and recognize that when it comes to almonds from California. So the other thing that's on your chair, I wanted to talk a little bit about how there's a lot of facts in that infographic, right? I just talked through some of those. I encourage you guys all to read that and find the things that are most relevant to you and how you feel comfortable talking about those, how it might relate to your farm or your operation. But there's also other ways you can use this information versus just having this infographic. So one of the ways is that I want to give an example of. The Almond Board creates snack packs for when we go visit people. We give away some almonds, and they're for meetings, they're for events, and historically they've just had some nutrition information on them, which is great. But they've talked about, almonds generally, and we decided how can we help spread this information more. So we've updated our snack pack to include, there's a cute little designed QR code here on the front that will bring you to a page on our website that talks about why almonds. It's their health, it's the sustainability story, it's their environmental stewardship credentials. And then also on the back, we put some of these facts from the infographic. There's a couple different ones, so if you grab different snack packs, you'll see these facts. But they really align with some key elements and areas that are important in the environmental stewardship and sustainability space. Those being water, biodiversity, climate, community, family, and zero waste. So this industry has a really holistic and substantive story to tell. I would challenge anyone who's just critiquing almonds on the basis of water to broaden their aperture and to not, that's a bit of greenwashing actually, to just focus on one aspect of something's sustainability. So I would challenge back, and I'm specifically talking about the coffee shop example that we heard yesterday, that it's not just water, right? There's all of these considerations when it comes to sustainability, and it's important to look at all of those things. So looking at them in the whole, this industry has some really great credentials. I say that coming from a trained sustainability, I have degrees in this standpoint, and this industry has a strong story to tell. We're gonna continue to substantiate that, and like we've said, shift the narrative and use this to continue to drive demand and continue to improve how we farm as well. So with that, I think that is my last slide. I'm going to hand it over to Mike, and then at the end we're going to take questions. So please keep those, and we're excited to continue to talk about this. Thank you.
Well, traditionally Thursday morning at the Almond conference, I'm not my sharpest, so. Good news for you, I have one single slide and 2 cartoons, so we. There you go. Yeah, I think Danielle hit it on the head when she was very concise about taking into consideration all the things that farmers are facing, and I think that is the number one priority when it comes to some of these initiatives is ensuring that it's actually achievable, and that's kind of where I want to start. So we started our journey about 7 years ago. Now, this is, my presentation is mostly going to be about what Harris Wolf is doing, mostly philosophically, what our approach is, not necessarily what individual initiatives are. We have on our website our impact report that explains all those initial initiatives, but I don't think that's important. What we'd like to share today is our approach and what we think might be important to focus on. How we started was having a willing ownership group. I think some of the Wolfs are here today, and Stuart Wolf is a pioneer in a lot of things. He's now into agave, which I know for sure is sustainably focused and delicious. But Stuart's focus about 7 years ago was an initial investment into pollinator habitats, and he thought that was important at the time. Nobody was getting paid for it. It was a large outlay of cash. But 7 years ago, the almond industry might have been in a different position cost-wise, so he was willing to make those investments. What he's done over that time period is brought Harris into the fold, and he really expanded upon some of the programs that they were doing. And it'll get to my, is that on the board there? Okay. That'll get to my next topic, is supportive customers. So in the beginning, we were the ones footing the bill for all of these initiatives, understanding and believing that there'd be a significant impact on the back end and what we believe would be compensation for that. So, as the Deloitte presentation indicated, customers are willing to pay a premium for these things. So through our supportive customers and eventually compensating us for what we were doing at the field level and ownership, testing these initiatives out in the beginning, we were able to kind of roll that out into the rest of our grower base. This is the biggest thing, and I harp on this in every meeting I've been in. I've been in arguments with CPGs about this, and I know you introduced me as the Vice President of Sales and Marketing, which can usually be kind of a bad word when it comes to growers, because growers don't always believe that the sales guy is saying the right things in these meetings, but I can assure you that, and our grower team is here today, I can assure you that I also manage some growers and have relationships, and it's really difficult to have the conversation when the farm isn't financially sustainable to ask you to participate in initiatives that are costing more money or taking more time. And it's really disheartening when prices are where they are now. Luckily, this is a different almond conference than last year and maybe the years prior, and I see a lot more smiles, and the Duarte party was a little more lively last night. So these are all positive indicators of what's going on. I heard sustainability talked about more at this conference than I've ever heard, which is exciting because I think it used to be one of those topics that was polarizing. And I think if you do it correctly and if you do it realistically, there we go, I nailed it. And you do practices that are scalable, I think it's definitely doable. There's an impact financially for you when you align with your customer base. And I think there are on-farm practices that produce great results that are adjacent to it. So it's not just a financial thing, it's a better crop or a better environment or healthier soils and whatnot. So I think we're getting there. I think there's a few of us, a few others in the room that were part of a couple of initiatives to help define what sustainable means. That's part of this scalable and achievable. The right people are in the room seemingly to make the decision to not kind of have a blanket idea about what sustainability is and make it something that's difficult for a grower to achieve. So I think your industry, your representatives within these individual work groups, they have the grower focus in mind. They have a really good understanding of what a CPG and the customer needs. So it seems like, and not because I'm part of this or anything, but it seems like the right people are in the right boat at the right time. And you heard Clarice the other day, right people, right time. This is the time to tell this story. COVID was a bummer. I mean, for a lot of reasons, other than, we positioned ourselves during COVID on the sustainability piece, and the hierarchy of needs changed from, I care about where my food grows to I just need food. So that kind of hampered our sustainability efforts, but we've been doing it a long time. We're seeing great success with it. And we've taken a conservative approach, did it again, with this. You said greenwashing earlier. That's something that terrifies us because I think we have one shot at this, and there's so much sensitivities around how almonds are, mentioned it in the media, how they're in television and movies. And The Good Place is one where it's like the reason he was in hell was because he was drinking almond milk. And, it's upsetting because a lot of us have dedicated our lives to this industry, and we know how important it is. We know all the great things, but we're not telling our story. So we have decided to leverage our existing resources in the Almond board, and I live in Visalia. So yeah, we got with the Almond board and we said we want to tell the story. We want to be able to hand something to a customer, CPG, somebody that we're interfacing with, and say this is what Harris Wolf is interested in, and this is what the almond industry is interested in. Because we have value-add products we do at Harris Wolf, and we want those value-add products to be a consideration within an ingredient base. And if the immediate story is almonds use too much water, then me or Blue Diamond or anybody else can't get to that customer because it's already a barrier. So we have a video that we'll show now. It's our first video that's more focused on generalities, and then we have a Harris Wolf focused video. So 2 cartoons, and I will be quiet.
All right.
Let's see the first one.
Those of us who remember Saturday morning.
Welcome to the world of sustainable almond farming with Harris Wolf Almonds. As stewards of the environment, we're dedicated to preserving our planet for future generations. At Harris Wolf, we're committed to innovation, grower relations, and transparency in our supply chain. Our grower incentive program empowers almond growers to measure their impact while promoting biodiversity and pollinator-friendly habitats. Through CASP assessment, we help growers measure inputs to improve on-farm efficiency and reduce costs, encouraging responsible fertilizer and water usage. In addition, Harris Wolf encourages whole orchard recycling that enriches soil and captures carbon. Compared to other fruit and nut trees growing in California, almond trees capture more carbon per acre. We are also harnessing the power of the sun. With solar projects in place, we are on track to have over 50% of energy consumption derived from renewable resources. We also know water is a big deal. In fact, between 1990 and 2010, California almond farmers reduced the water needed to grow each almond by 33%. Between the years 2018 and 2022, we have reduced another 15%. Water conservation initiatives are important to Harris Wolf, and we encourage the progress. Our owner-growers, Wolf Farming, have converted farm ground into a recharge basin to replenish aquifers. Wolf Farming recharged approximately 31,000 acre-feet of excess winter storm runoff, equivalent to filling 15,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. This project is dedicated to conserving and replenishing the Central Valley's water supply. We not only want to conserve and replenish, but we aim to restore as well. Our innovative wastewater filtration system is a high-impact, nature-based solution that harnesses the natural filtration power of earthworms to improve water quality. Additionally, this system produces quality fertilizer and sequesters carbon. With a focus on water conservation, pollinator preservation, soil health, and greenhouse gas emission and waste reduction, we are committed to making a positive impact on our environment. Join us on our journey towards sustainability and a greener future with Harris Wolf Almonds. Together, we're preserving our planet for future generations.
So I apologize, that was our personal one there. I know there's a lot of information in that video. We're hoping that a customer sees it, pauses it, watches it over and over again, and sends it to others in the group. The second one is more focused on the industry at large, and I'll say it again. We sent the script over to the Almond board for approvals. Are the things we're saying directionally correct? Are they accurate? Actually, we use the infographic, some of that, so you'll see some of that translating. I know it's not the highest level of animation, but I think it proves the point. It was very difficult to actually do that whole process, but I think it proves.
Nitrogen deficiency in some of those trees that they showed there.
Well, full disclosure, I don't think the animator knew much about agriculture. So, yeah, let's see that second video, and then I'll be quiet. Yeah.
Did you know that growing almonds is a sustainable choice? For every drop of water, almonds yield not 1, but 4 valuable crops. Hulls for cattle feed, shells for various uses like bedding for livestock, wood from the tree itself as a carbon sink, and the delicious and versatile nut. Using all 4 crops ensures nothing goes to waste, but it is also a unique way to save water. Did you know that almond hulls can replace alfalfa hay in up to 20% of dairy feed formulations, reducing the acreage needed to grow alfalfa by 386,000 acres, or 440 billion gallons of water? That's equivalent to the annual water use of 4 million U.S. households, or enough to fill 667,000 Olympic swimming pools. Almond farmers have been pioneers in water conservation for decades, adopting micro-irrigation methods pioneered in the 1980s. Today, over 80% of almond farms employ this water-saving technology, resulting in a 33% reduction in water usage per almond since the 1990s, with further reductions planned through innovative tools and regenerative practices. Feel comfortable knowing that nutritious California almonds are sustainably and responsibly grown. Harris Wolf Almonds is proud to be a leader in sustainable almond farming.
Yeah, we'd be happy to let any of you other packers out there use that video for your customers as well. So, yeah.
Nice.
I think it tells the story without too much Harris Wolf. Yeah, moving on.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll hand it over to Josette.
All right. Well, and that's just a great illustration of what you started us off with, Danielle, where, that data and those tools are for everyone to use. They're not owned, and they're there on behalf of the industry, and to see you kind of take that and make it your own is really exactly what we want to see. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about water now. I think we can all agree that is sort of our Achilles heel in the industry. I think all of us have had the personal experience of meeting someone new and telling them you work in almonds, and they say, "Don't almonds take a lot of water?" So we recognize that while we have some good data that hopefully, and some new stuff in that infographic that hopefully help you answer that question a little bit better, we know longer term we need to have more data, we need to have a more powerful story that really demonstrates that we are responsibly grown here in California to some of the highest standards in the world. And we are a good citizen of this state. That's very important to our social license or our freedom to farm. It's important that our fellow Californians think we're a responsible part of the state, and that hopefully we can make them proud that almonds are grown here in the same way people are proud that wine is made here in California. So how are we going to do that going forward, building on the data that you already have there in the infographic? All right. So we kind of have 3 key levers that we can pull at the Almond Board that are sort of pre-competitive and hopefully serve the whole industry. The first, which is really important because this is how we get to that 33% improvement that we've already cited, is research that we fund that we then package through our industry outreach programs to give growers tools to be the most efficient and the most precise in their use of water resources. And we have a long history of funding irrigation research. We have something called the Irrigation Continuum, which gives growers a lot of opportunities to ladder up their practices to get more precise in their use of water, and hopefully have some cost savings to themselves as well. So that continues to be an important part of how we work, is to fund research and distill that into very practical tools that a grower or a certified crop consultant can use to help advise them, even things to be used in irrigation system design. And I will give you a taste of one of those tools that's hopefully coming forward in the next few years. So working to do the hard work with those 7,000 plus farmers to help them be as efficient as they can for their bottom line and as an aggregate for the whole industry. The other, as you've seen, is we can fund scientific research to get credible data that's in peer-reviewed literature. And that is very important, particularly in the light of a world where companies get sued for greenwashing and for claims that they're making in the marketplace. So having published scientific data is a really powerful tool in our environmental stewardship, just as it is in our production research. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then the last area is that we have a history of partnering with reputable third parties, particularly conservation-oriented groups, that not only can help expand our ability to make a difference on the ground with growers. They often have staff that can go out and work with growers one-on-one. They do their own outreach. But they also can be third-party spokespersons and defend our reputation and talk about the good work that is taking place on our farms with our handlers and in our industry. And that can be very important to help get that word out more broadly, and also not be seen as just our promoting our own storyline. So those are the three things that we really focus on how we're going to move forward with water. And as you've heard a little bit already, a great example of where we've been able to turn the tide on this is around pollinators. I hadn't even been working for the Almond Board an entire year when The Guardian published an article online that said, like sending bees to war, the real truth behind your almond milk. I was actually at a beekeeping meeting while that came out, so it was particularly disturbing. And honestly, if you Google almonds and bees, you will find that story in one of the top hits. So that was a particularly low point, but it's a point that had been building up over a lot of years, starting with honeybees. The claim that because we all put honeybees in our orchard, and a good portion of the nation's commercial honeybees come to almonds, that we were responsible for all the problems experienced in the honeybee industry. So colony collapse disorder, pesticide residues, everything you could say somehow was attributed to almonds. And that was bad enough, but we're now in a world, starting this week, where we have pollinators being listed as endangered species. This week, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife listed the monarch butterfly, and we have 4 native bees being considered for listing here in California. So we also have to think about native pollinators, because we are the largest crop by acreage, and we are a lot of that land in the Central Valley. But we can already see, and you see it in the infographic, and you heard it in the beginning of the journey of Harris Wolf almonds, that this is a really easy entry point for a lot of growers to add pollinator habitat on and around their orchards. We've done a lot of work on cover crops, planting cover crops that have floral species within them that can be beneficial to honeybees, and scientific research indeed shows that honeybee hives coming out of almond orchards are healthier and the bees are more numerous. They're very numerous coming out of orchards with no cover crop, but they're even healthier if there's a cover crop. Like all animals in the world, having a diverse diet is a key to good nutrition, and that helps you fend off a lot of diseases, which is the same in honeybees as it is with us. So as you've heard, we've just by sharing that scientific research that helps growers make decision on what a cover crop could do agronomically for their orchard, as well as maybe help them get some of the best beekeepers to come in and provide pollination services. We've seen a really rapid expansion of cover crop use in our industry. In fact, a 4-fold increase in planted cover crop in the space of just 3 years. So now that more than 20% of the orchards in the California Almond Stewardship Platform, or CASP, have a planted cover crop. That's really a high number, actually, for almost any commodity in the world. But going beyond that, programs like bee-friendly farming that you've heard about through Pollinator Partnership, and they have a table out here, I think in the incentive zone, and they have a booth downstairs. These are programs which have a lot of free resources for you, including free planting material. Through bee-friendly farming, we've been able to add more than 35,000 acres of permanent habitat on almond farms. This is stuff outside the orchard, not the cover crop. And that's a really important benefit for native pollinators, whether it's monarch butterflies or native bees. And in fact, we've also funded research. I have them right here. Why am I bending over? We've also funded research that showed that having floral resources outside an almond orchard, in the form like a hedgerow or a cover crop or a floral strip, actually provides a net benefit, that's a conservation standard, to native bees, because that improved nutrition and food availability enables those native pollinators to perhaps stay healthy even in light of potential pesticide exposure because of being adjacent to a conventional orchard. So there's a net conservation benefit associated with that pollinator habitat, and that's a very powerful story for us to tell. We've done a great job of working with a broad range of pollinator organizations, Monarch Joint Venture, Pollinator Partnership, Project APISM. If you go to our website and you subscribe to In the Orchard, we also share information from other organizations, the Resource Conservation District, Xerces Society, all have great programs to help you put in habitat. So this is a great factual demonstration of the work that our industry can do and gives us some ideas of how we can work towards a better story on water. So this is some brand new analysis that we commissioned at the Almond Board that shows here in California, this is actual data on water use by some of our important crops using a brand new satellite-based tool that allows us to look at water use across a broad range of crops here in the state. And this is average for the whole state. So you can see here, almonds are not the thirstiest crop, and other nut crops like pistachios are not substantially less water users than almonds. So this is great data for us to have. I hear a lot of very excited sounds coming from the audience here. It's really important that this kind of data gets into the scientific peer-reviewed publications, because then it has greater value. It gets out into a lot of different uses beyond us just talking from the Almond Board. So we are looking at how we can commission some new research or fund some new research. And it's important to note, when we do fund research, we don't really have any say once we approve a project. It's up to the researchers to do their work. We don't have any say in the final publication. We don't meddle in the findings, even if there are findings we don't particularly love. We just have to live with it. But the value of getting that scientific publication is very important for the credibility of this data. Again, in a world where people can sue over claims of environmental issues in the food industry. It's also really important because increasingly there are food companies that have to account for and disclose their environmental footprint. And they may be doing this voluntarily. As you talked about, you have an impact report that you put out every year. So some companies are being very proactive because they want investors and customers to know what their commitments are. In other cases, now there are regulations that are coming into effect that require food brands, among other companies, to make public disclosures about things such as their carbon footprint here in California, but also their climate risk. And this is very important for us in almonds. One of our climate risks for anything grown in the state of California agriculturally is, what is the water supply going to look like into the future? And does climate change pose a material risk to sourcing an ingredient into your product from California? And so getting the facts straight into the kinds of data that food brands use to do these analyses is really important. And it's hard for us to track that down in every database around the world, but getting it into the scientific literature is the next step. We've already heard about the incredible number, 440 billion gallons of water that is saved in California by using almond hulls as a feed for the dairy industry rather than having to grow alfalfa to get the equivalent nutritional value. What's really interesting as we've dug into our reputation on water is that the way water footprints have conventionally been done in the research community you don't get credit for offsets such as this. However, in a carbon footprint, you do. In our life cycle assessment, we get credit for the use of almond co-products in the total carbon footprint. So there's an opportunity here to even reset the 1 gallon per nut type story by looking at water footprint more holistically as they do in the carbon footprint realm. So that's some work that we have ahead of us. I talked about grower tools. Again, this is a really foundational part of what we do at the Almond Board. And we're able through CASP, again, the California Almond Stewardship Platform, which I encourage you to consider participating in if you have not. It is a really, as I always say, it is the most comprehensive data on how any food product is grown in the world. We have the largest participation. The percent of the growers and acres in our industry is represented in this data set, and there's no other in the world that's quite comparable, unless you went to some like maybe super niche crop that I'm not thinking about. But it helps us also understand if there's opportunities to do more outreach, to get growers information. So what we can tell here in this, the irrigation continuum is a tool we developed a number of years ago that sort of define levels of precision in how a grower applies their irrigation water. Are they doing it on a calendar-based system where, you know, a certain day of the week, they turn on the irrigation system for a certain length of time, same every time? Or do they actually take measurements in the orchard, whether it's soil moisture measurements or evapotranspiration measurements using a pressure bomb? There's a whole lot of, there's these layers or steps within the continuum that sort of ladder up to more precision. And so we can track through things like CASP how growers are doing. And we can see here that we've seen an increase in precision. So the higher the level, the more accurate it is. And so you can see there, we're making a lot of improvements in the number of growers who are getting up to levels, to level 3 in particular. You can see in this one in terms of, and that's a great story to tell because that's the, you don't get to less water other than taking plants out. That's your best way. So as we think about communicating to a broad range of audience, whether it's policymakers, food brands, or the consumer, one of our really powerful tools are you, the grower. You are the face of the industry, and it's important that when people buy food, they understand they're coming from real people. And again, this is a real powerful opportunity for our industry because we are not industrial agriculture. We are a lot of family farms, and a lot of those are small family farms. And we want to make sure that people understand that you are doing hard work and you are making compromises to be a part of your communities and to be part of a state where water is a limiting factor. And this storytelling is a powerful, again, based on facts. No actors are standing in for farmers in our videos. So we know there are farmers serving on GSAs. They're making hard decisions and working with communities, other water users, to try to figure out how to compromise across these diverse interests. So that's an important story we can tell. Any farmer who has to fallow their land because they can't afford water or because they are in an overdrafted GSA and they don't have access to irrigation water, that's a huge economic hit to your bottom line. If you have land in a white area and the land prices have fallen through dramatically because of water limitations, again, that's another economic hit that growers have taken already. And as we'll hear from Ashley, we have a really powerful story to tell around groundwater recharge and the hard work that growers are doing to truly be part of the solution of using farmland to recharge our groundwater banks so that in dry years we have access to water, not just for farms, but also for communities. And then another sort of level of storytelling that we have to work hard to get to convince folks of is really to counter this idea that we shouldn't be growing food in California because we don't have enough water. And I'm sure a lot of us have heard that. But I would actually like to flip that story and flip the pain that you as a grower probably experience with respect to all the regulations that we have around water, to instead create the narrative that this is the place in the world where we will prove out what sustainable water management looks like. So it's the other side of our double-edged sword, is that if you're going to source food, this is actually the best place to get your food because it's grown to the highest standards, and because we're doing the hard work, some of it very painful for a grower, but we are engaged in it, and we are on a path to define what sustainability looks like for one of our most precious resources. And I really do believe we have that power. I mean, California is renowned around the world for our environmental commitments. So that's an opportunity working not just within our industry, but also maybe with some food brands to really start to change that narrative, to show that this is actually a really fantastic place to source your food, and there will always be water for farms, and there will always be almonds in California. And the last area where we will work to, again, improve our data and recontextualize the water we use to grow almonds is around what we would call sustainable nutrition. And again, this is a whole area of scientific research now, where looking at not just how much water it takes to grow almonds, but what you get for that water, which is a very powerful and nutritious food. Hopefully some of you have seen this infographic that we debuted here at the Almond Conference. And being able to combine the nutritional quality together with the inputs, whether it's water and carbon and biodiversity, and there are scientific tools and modeling systems that people are developing in the research community to try to look at the balance, because it is a balance. No one food is perfect, because we can't, like honeybees, can't survive just on almond pollen and nectar. They need diverse diets, so do we. So you want to look at a diversity of sustainability attributes, and tying that to the quality of the product you grow is a very powerful opportunity for us to generate more data in that area. So that's sort of a preview of the types of things that we are going to work towards this coming year and beyond. Some of these will probably take us a little while to fully flip that narrative, but gives you a sense of how broad and bold we want to tackle this problem going forward. And last but not least, I'm going to turn to Ashley, because a really critical part of that, both in reality and in terms of changing the narrative, is groundwater recharge. And so maybe you could talk to us a little bit about why that's important and what you're seeing happening.
Great. Thanks for having me today. I'm Ashley Boren, CEO of Sustainable Conservation. And for those of you who don't know Sustainable Conservation, we're a California nonprofit organization that's dedicated to bringing people together to solve some of the serious challenges facing our land, air, and water. So that means every day we're working with almond growers, water agencies, industry associations, regulators, other conservation organizations, and others to figure out how to steward the resources we all depend on in ways that are just and, importantly, make economic sense. And we're a nonprofit, but one thing you should know is, because our mission is to bring people together, our board and our advisory committees are made up of agricultural representatives, folks from government experience, conservation, environmental, to really try to figure out how do we find solutions that really ensure we have a thriving agriculture into the future, that we have thriving ecosystems, and that our communities are healthy as well. So we're trying to solve for multiple objectives at the same time. And Stuart Wolf actually is a former board member and a current San Joaquin Valley Regional Committee member who, again, with others, advise us on our program strategies. So we've had just a great partnership with the Almond Board of California, particularly around the area of water, although it's expanding into other areas as well. And we got involved in the water issue because groundwater in particular is a very serious challenge for California, and particularly for the San Joaquin Valley, which is where most of this work focuses, although some also in the Sacramento Valley. And As you know, everyone knows that we've had serious overdraft that led to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. There are kind of two ways to solve the problem. You can either reduce your demand, and actually the Almond Board and almond growers have done, really remarkable progress in becoming more water use efficient, or you can add to the supply, or some combination of both, right? It's going to be some combination of the both. But where we're trying to work is on the supply side, and groundwater recharge has been happening for, decades in the San Joaquin Valley, but we saw an opportunity to expand the ways to do groundwater recharge, and we were introduced to this idea by an almond grower, grows a diversity of crops, but Don Cameron in 2011, some of you may know that name. He farms on the Kings River in Fresno County. He's in a white area, he's entirely dependent on groundwater, and he had been experimenting for years on when there were big wet years, letting some of that water flow onto his active cropland. And so in 2011, we partnered with him along with some scientists, Phil Bichon and others, to really understand and document what was happening. In 2011, if you remember, was a really big water year, and he recharged a tremendous amount of groundwater and had very little effect on his yields or the health of his crops. And for us, we had kind of an aha moment, because there's so much land in the San Joaquin Valley that has good sandy soils to percolate water into the aquifer. We thought, wow, this could really be a part of the solution. So we started learning more about it, mapping, actually partnering with the Almond Board, who was very open to always looking at kind of new ideas, how to improve sustainability. And so the Almond Board played the very important role of helping develop the science with Helen Dahlke and others about what could almond growers safely do, and when could they recharge, and what were the potential implications for health and yields. So anyway, with all that information, our role in partnering has really been to kind of get the word out, develop guidance materials for growers. We organize grower workshops. We've done case studies. We've partnered and created a groundwater recharge assessment tool, which is a geospatial tool that takes information about soil type, geologic layers underneath, where conveyance is, helps water agencies figure out how they can optimize groundwater recharge in their basins. And what I want to say is we've made some great progress, and so I just have a few slides to show the progress. And let's see, this button?
Yep. Green. Oh, green.
Green, sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and I can't see these slides.
One more. One more. There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, so 2023 was a really big water year, as everybody probably remembers, and the Public Policy Institute of California did a study that got released just this year, where they looked at how much water was recharged in the San Joaquin Valley compared to 2017, which was our last big water year. And overall, with all methods, there was a 17% increase, which is significant. And it's actually pretty comparable years, the amount of precipitation both years in that region, where it was about the same. And then importantly, this concept of on-farm recharge nearly doubled, and went really from what they stated as being kind of an experimental idea to much more mainstream in 2023, as growers have realized that what potential they have in taking advantage of wet years and letting that water, onto their fields and to percolate into groundwater. And I sometimes smile because you might think it's a little crazy that an environmental organization is telling you should flood irrigate when you have so much pressure on you to be water use efficient. But really, I think in the ideal world, with California kind of swinging between droughts and then these big crazy wet years, we want you to take as much water as you can at the right times that protect the health of the crops, and recharge that groundwater so that you're preparing for droughts in the future, and then during droughts be as efficient as possible. So kind of dual methods. And then I think the other really important thing from this study that we took heart in was there was actually a missed opportunity. There was probably nearly 50% more water that could have been recharged if we had had the facilities and the growers and everyone prepared. So while we've made great progress through partnerships with the Almond Board, these grower workshops, grower networks, there's still more opportunity. And I'm going to just show one last slide. And the Department of Water Resources is very interested in what this idea and what they call it flood managed aquifer recharge, because as we face these years where we're going to get volatile weather and have atmospheric rivers and big water events, it's a serious flood risk in a number of our watersheds. So how can we mitigate that flood risk and recharge groundwater at the same time? So mitigate flood and prepare for drought at the same time. And they're doing a series of studies. They're called Flood-Mar watershed studies. The results of the first one are out. The other 4 will be out sometime next year. But just to show you kind of the potential. Let me see. Okay, so in the Merced River watershed, just using existing conveyance and the farmland that's appropriate to accept water, that watershed could address its groundwater overdraft by, is it 31%? Forgot my numbers. 31. Thank you. If they also reoperate reservoirs in that watershed to time the releases and do forecast-informed reservoir operation, that number goes up to, help me, 46%. And then if they do that, in addition to adding some additional conveyance infrastructure, it goes all the way up to 63%. And importantly, it would mitigate flood risk in that watershed by 65%. So this concept really has a lot of potential, and I would say it's one we kind of have to implement. We really have to take these findings and what these scenarios for snowpack and runoff are telling us in various watersheds and figure out how, again, to mitigate flood risk and recharge groundwater at the same time. That's my last slide. Oh, that's the flood risk one. So you wanted me to talk about what next also?
Yeah, actually, if you could talk about how do we get to that 63%?
Yeah, so it's getting the word out, continuing to, we found that what works best is growers talking to growers. So what we try to do is really just facilitate the conversation, hold field days and work days, put out information on case studies that are available. Actually, I think quite a few of the case studies have been on almond growers. There's guidance specifically for almond growers. And then importantly, we are doing this work, and the Almond Board we're partnering on it, is working with groundwater sustainability agencies and water irrigation districts to really encourage that they have recharge programs that incentivize this kind of on-farm recharge or small basins on private lands, in addition to the traditional methods for recharge, which are dedicated recharge basins. We need all of it, and particularly in the big water years, we're going to need these additional methods. So working with the water agencies and encouraging incentives, because while we can show that you can do this in a way that doesn't affect yields or crop health, it's still a risk for a farmer, and there's still some cost to doing it. So incentives are needed to really make this happen and to scale. So that's another thing. And then I think also, working with those same water agencies to talk about the results that are coming out of the Department of Water Resources Flood-Mar studies about what the future holds for us in terms of snowpack and runoff, and making sure the water agencies are really thinking ahead about how to prepare for those kinds of events so that we can, again, mitigate flood risk and prepare for future droughts at the same time. And then we're also doing some work on soil health and various practices, because there's, we talk a lot about what soil health can do for carbon sequestration and others, but I don't think there's enough emphasis on the importance of soil health for water. Good soil health practices help water infiltrate into the aquifer more quickly. Good soil health practices hold water and can reduce irrigation use, and they're also great for binding nutrients and really can protect water quality. So there's a lot on the soil health side as well. And then I'll just say, in terms of telling stories and having your partners tell your stories, we love featuring almond growers on our webinars. And I was going to show a piece of it today, but we have a great video we did recently about groundwater recharge, and both Down Cameron's on there, but also Christine Gemperle, talking about why she does it. And it's not just for her own farm, but she's doing it also because she's concerned about her neighbor's wealth. She wants to make sure that the water supply is sufficient so that her neighbor can rely on that water as well. So,
wonderful. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ashley and Josette and Mike. Really appreciate that. And join me in giving them a round of applause. Thank you, guys. So I'm just going to summarize a couple insights that I've had as we've gone through all the comments, and then I'd love to open it up for questions from you guys. But I want to recognize sustainability looks differently on all of our farms. I recently heard Secretary Ross say, if you've seen one farm, you've seen one farm. And that's really going to stick with me. And so a lot of these stats and facts and figures that we talked about, they're going to look different on every farm. And I think that's okay. And we need to recognize that it looks differently up and down the valley and on all of our farms. But holistically, this industry has a really strong story to tell. I did want to recognize the Almond Board's work in this space is guided by the industry. We have a task force that's been developed, the Environmental Stewardship Task Force. Actually, Mike sits on that with me. And so the industry's voices are important for guiding our work in this space, whether it's our strategies, our tactics, our research investments. And that's not just at that work group level. We work with all of the different committees at ABC to ensure that we're investing and really building forward the space in a way that aligns with the industry's needs and interests. From Harris Wolf's perspective, I think one thing that the video spotlighted really well and that we do in the infographics, if you're looking to work in this space, is the importance of equivalences. That's what I call it when you take a number or a stat that's like 30 million metric tons and you make it meaningful to people, because this is complicated stuff. And sometimes like those numbers are meaningless unless you can convert it into something that people can understand. So if you're going to work in this space, I'd really encourage you to do so. And I love seeing that in the video. Like Mike talked about, we worked with them in developing their content in the video, and we're happy to do that and give you counsel on what we know about different audiences, our insights holistically. Of course, as industry members, you're going to match that up with what you know, but I am happy to be a resource. Josette, any of us on staff are happy to share what we know and help you in that space, so please reach out. I love seeing from Josette the ETA data. So that was the actual evapotranspiration. That was the chart that showed the latest information on almonds and water use. It's really important to continue to evolve and understand data in that space. But I do want to caution us a little bit. We have to be careful not to disparage. It's actually something we cannot do as a federal marketing order. But we also recognize that we all farm different crops, right? Like my family has a custom farming business that works for dairies. So just understand that we're going to use that information and data in a responsible way. We're not going to go out and point fingers. That doesn't help anybody in that space. So the data and the context is important. We need to make sure it's accurate. We need to make sure databases are up to date. But just know that, we have to be careful about the temptation just to point fingers elsewhere. That doesn't serve anyone well. No. And I think another point Josette made that I'm really passionate about, and I think we all are, is really challenging some of the status quo in the research and methodology of assessing sustainability. This does continue to be an evolving science and an evolving world, specifically on water footprint and the opportunity there to look at the contributions, the offsets that we have. That's something that I'm excited to continue to do and to help evolve some of those kind of narrow-minded methodologies. And then also, as Josette highlighted, sustainable nutrition, I think, is a really important space going forward for this industry. So linking the nutrition of our product and what we get out of it as humans and how it helps our human health globally, and tying that to the sustainability performance. It's a even newer and more evolving area of science, but something that we're committed to working forward in a responsible way for the industry. And we have to be careful not to be too far out on the edge, but it's something that we're going to be looking at and working on in the Environmental Stewardship Work Group, as well as with our Nutrition Research Committee. And then finally, with Ashley, partnering with aligned third-party partners is so valuable to this industry. We can achieve more together. We're working on common goals, but it adds credibility and visibility to this industry. So sometimes, some of those groups might make us uncomfortable, not sustainable conservation, of course. But it's really important to be open to things like that. We can, yes, achieve more together, but it lends credibility and visibility to the work that we're doing on our farms. And finally, with groundwater recharge and Sigma, Sigma is not a comfortable thing. It's difficult, and water in general is difficult for this industry, but the work that the industry is doing, the work that the board has funded, the work we're doing in partnership with Sustainable Conservation, it's making a real difference. You can see the impact there, the amount of water that's actually can be captured on farm or is being captured. So the hope there is that it's also, while being able to tell our story about these things, hopefully it's also making a difficult thing slightly less difficult, at least on the large scale. But we acknowledge that it is a difficult thing. Obviously, there's lots of challenges in this space, but
A lot of work to be done.
yes, but hopefully what you guys have taken away from this is we're using what's happening on our farms to help tell the industry's story, to give you tools to do the same. Obviously, lots of opportunities that we're going to continue to work on as the Almond board on your behalf. But thank you for raising these things. Continue to raise them to us in ways that we can help serve you best. I don't see any other burning questions out there. Any other last words from our panelists? All right. Well, thank you guys very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.